The Power Hour is on the air. Live streaming to you on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. Happy Monday evening, everybody. It's great to have you on the show. We've got a huge lineup of just great pieces to go over today. And we've got no time to spare. So I'm going to get into it. We've got training camp notes for a lot of situations going down right now. We've got some Tennessee Titan training camp notes for our Tennessee Titan friends. Then later on in the show, we're going to discuss a piece about field goal percentage. Is it actually as bad as it's been? In the last few years, it seems like it's been declining. Let's get a look into it and see what's going on. Then I'm going to break down to the Hall of Fame 2021 Enshrinement class. I'm going to look at each individual and share what they brought to the game, and especially just give them the props and the salute that they truly deserve. And we'll be breaking down our first preseason game of the season, August 5th. On Fox will be the Dallas Cowboys playing the Steelers in the Hall of Fame game. I don't want to get too much into this, but it was something I wanted to address, especially as the day kind of went on. And it involves Carson Wentz and it involves Colin Cowherd. And I've already talked about what I felt about Colin Cowherd. I'm not going to get too into it, but I am going to lay down a little beef and grill it. It just seems like, once again, even when a situation where the Colts have some bad luck, and it's luck on the side of where they can't consistently get a quarterback to continually play for them in the long term run. And when Carson Wentz was signed, my biggest problem with him was nothing more than him having a huge fumble issue. And it's true. I went through it in an entirely different show. Throughout his career, he's had 57 fumbles and he's lost about 23 of them. And that's within a span of 5 to 6 years being in the league. And that's a huge problem. I don't care who you are. That is a major problem if you're a quarterback trying to get the exchange from the center, or if you're trying to make a play for yourself. And that's something that Carson Wentz has struggled with during the season. But unfortunately, during this week, Carson Wentz suffered a foot injury. And the reports came out today that he will be going through surgery, and he's expected out about 5 to 12 weeks. So, in the healing process of that, it just depends on how much time he can miss, especially while he's trying to rehab. And he's had leg history. He's had a lot of leg history. So, getting back to Colin Cowherd. So, once again, he comes out and basically says, well, Indy can win this division. It's a bad division. And I'm not arguing that point, but I'm going to argue the fact that once again, he's thrown the Tennessee Titans under the bus. At what expense? For just trying to basically sell your ware, to basically just put out something and just cause more fuss than it needs to be. Well, let's be honest. I've been completely just floored with just how much disrespect the Tennessee Titans get as an organization. And that's fine. I can put up with it for a little bit, but at the same process, Colin Cowherd doesn't give much of a valid reason other than he doesn't trust them. And let me just be frank. It's not the fact that there's holes in the team, and there are some. They're still trying to work things out. But the fact is, what is Tennessee untrustworthy of at this point? They've gone out and they've got Julio Jones. They went out and they drafted some very viable defensive help. They restructured their secondary. They managed to continue to keep a huge part of their core together. They are still one of the most successful franchises in the last 5 years. And I don't understand what the whole point of it is. I don't understand to what point is it going to matter other than just trying to sell the show. And it just gets old. And it's frustrating at this point. I get the fact that the Colts have a good defense. I get the fact they have a decent running game. I get the fact they have a great offensive line. But yet, even without a quarterback, there's still some kind of just one little edge that's going to put them over the top. Well, let's be honest. If you're comparing the two teams, Tennessee's the better team right now. They don't have holes like Indy does. And Indy has a glaring hole at the quarterback situation. I mean, Jacob Eason is going to be the starter probably regardless, unless Indy can scrape together some money and make a trade. Nick Foles might be the viable option there. And even if that happens, I see that just being a bad idea because that's just starting a whole new ball of wax that was started in Philly that basically ended Carson Wentz's tenure there and ending him up in Indy. So I don't understand what Colin Cowherd keeps coming at. I don't get the fact that this is a team that feels that he can't trust. This team's gone to the playoffs for consecutive years. They've put up consecutive 9-7 wins. They've improved on the quarterback situation. They have an elite running back. They have a budding young star at wide receiver. They go out and get a Hall of Fame wide receiver on the opposite end when they lose their best guy. Excuse me. So I don't understand what there's not to trust. If it's defensive, I've already gone through that. They basically regutted the entire secondary and started fresh. And I think they're going to do fine. From what reports from training camp have said, I think they'll be all right. But yet, for some reason, this still has to be an issue. And I'm just tired of the whole issue, and that's all I'm going to say about it. I mean, Colin Cowherd once again just shows he's just going with the basic. He wants to be the basic guy that just trashes the team, that does everything right, but at the same instance is still trying to push the narrative that they're not good enough. I don't get it, Colin Cowherd. I mean, just it's time to just kill. It's stop beating the dead horse. That's all I gotta say. Stop beating the dead horse. You don't have to keep going after just the most simple idea that you think that this team can compete, that you just can't trust them. They have their issues, but they're a better team than Indy. I can guarantee you that. If the season started today, Tennessee's winning the division. It will be with a fight, but I guarantee you they are the better team. In a division that, yes, is pretty bad, but I guarantee you it's not because of Tennessee. But it is what it is, and you're just going to continue just to probably just say what you have to say until they prove otherwise. And I hope that's the case. I really do hope that's the case. It's just tiring, and it's just the same narrative, and it's just that's all I'm going to say about it. Well, guys, let's take a quick 30-second break. And when I come back, we'll break down all the training camp notes and news for the week. I'm Michael Bishop with the Power Hour. We'll be back in 30. The Power Hour is on the air with your host, Michael Bishop. We are live streaming on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. Thank you for once again joining me on this Monday evening, and it is great to have all these topics to discuss with you. Well, guys, we got camp stuff to talk about, so let's fire it up. All right, breaking down our training camp notes for the Tennessee Titans first. Caleb Farley has taken the field, and it is going to electrocute just the fully basis of that this team is not going to have him for at least half the season. I'm excited. The fact that he comes out and basically surprises everybody, you really get the idea that this is going to be a season where he's going to get a chance to showcase his talent. Now, granted, it's going to take some time to get him adjusted and acclimated to everything. But I do feel that going forward that he's going to get the opportunity to do it, and it looks like he'll take every advantage that he can. Also moving on, with the addition of Chester Rogers stepping up in the wide receiver position, Josh Reynolds continues to be out with a hamstring issue, apparently. So at this point right now, it's a consistent story that the wide receiver position is going to be one of interest for the Tennessee Titans. Now, basically, I continue to look at everybody, especially as the season progresses. And at this point, it's surprising me right now how good Chester Rogers has been playing. And I've got the chance to watch some film on him, and it's a very brief film, but it looks good what he's doing, especially with Josh Reynolds not being able to take snaps. So from that perspective, it's an older guy getting the opportunity to get reps and to get time in training camp and showcase his talent. I think he's got a chance to make this squad. I really do. You need a guy with experience. You need a veteran that's savvy and can get out there on the field. And I think Josh Reynolds will be fine. I think right now it's just a situation where they have to monitor everything. But I think, in the sense of this receiving core, you're going to need youth, but you also need experience. And that's where Julio comes in. That's where AJ comes in. And I think Chester Brown can fill in as well. You've got a guy that's really taken advantage of the opportunity that it has. And I definitely think that he's somebody that should be looked out for as the season progresses. And finally, out of Tennessee Titans training camp news, was a little scary incident. Julio Jones went up for a potential pass in the end zone and came down, landed awkward, and ended up having to be helped off the field. But the good news was that apparently the trainers hadn't had a chance to just get him off the field. Everything was fine from what everything looked like. It was just at the end of this, it was the end of basically the whole premise of what they were trying to get done on that squad. And the trainers determined that at that point, that it was time that he should just go in and just kind of keep it low key for the day. And that's fine. I don't think it was anything major. I think it was just, it got attention. And eventually, if there was an opportunity that somebody caught him in a boot or caught him getting wheeled out in a wheelchair, I'm pretty sure that was going to be big news. So, in that perspective, I think Julio will be fine. I think they're going to try and keep him very limited, especially while he's trying to recover. So, in that sense, I think you just got to wait and see how it goes with Julio. But I know they're going to try and get him some reps. Do see him possibly sitting in maybe the first preseason game with Atlanta. So it's possible you might see him in street clothes. It wouldn't surprise me. So really, it's just timing and just getting him in when the time is right. So in the case of Julio, it's just making sure that they keep him healthy for the long run. And he doesn't have to do everything this time around. It's not like in Atlanta where Calvin Ridley was growing at the receiving position. They've already got a guy in A.J. Brown. They've already got Josh Reynolds when he'll be healthy. And Anthony Firkser has been a very big surprise in this camp. So A.J. Brown is going to help Julio Jones elevate his talent. And he'll help take some of the burden off of him, along with the others. So we'll just keep that monitored, and I'm pretty sure right now it's a known story as of the moment. Now we'll get into the NFL training camp news as we go along. As mentioned earlier, Carson Wentz has had an injured foot, and he will be out 5 to 12 weeks. Right now, the Colts' options are very limited, especially with a lot of money being tied up with some of their free agents as to be next year. So a trade could be possible if they're willing to get rid of that kind of leverage and try and see if they can match just some salary there. Nick Foles is an option that's been mentioned, and I think for them, in the long run, I think that might cause problems, especially since Carson Wentz was trying to get out of that situation when Nick Foles basically became the starting quarterback in Philly. So I don't think that's the road you want to go down. I think Jacob Eason is worth giving a shot. It's at least enough to see what he can do in this training camp and if he can command lead and just get the Colts to that point where they can be competitive enough. It's hard to say what it'll be, but I do feel that the Colts are going to do whatever they can to try and save some money. They've got too many deals to finish up before the next offseason comes. They've still got a lot to do, so I really think they'll probably just stick with the guys they have on the roster. Also in news, we've got Nick Chubbs had agreed to a $36.6 million contract for 3 years with the Cleveland Browns. And this was a good deal to get done. I think Cleveland knew that they've got a bruiser. He's been capable since he stepped foot on the field, and he's been one of the big pieces that's really just helped elevate this team. So you really had to keep Nick Chubbs in play. I think he's just one of the top 5 running backs in the league. And it's a really good deal on his end and for Cleveland, especially since the fact they still have to try and get Baker Mayfield signed. And as of the moment right now, it's a very slow process, but it'll get monitored. And at the same time, we'll see how that turns out when it comes up. From the Minnesota Vikings, Kirk Cousins and Kellen Mond are on the COVID list as of right now. Both had tested and showed symptoms and are now put 10 days on the list and can possibly get back 72 hours after showing symptoms, or if improved or approved even by the medical officer of the NFL. So it's unfortunate that this is still going around. And right now at this point, it's just basically trying to keep the players, the coaches, and even the fans safe. It's hard to really just try and not get into this without being in any kind of sense word political or even try and make it a political issue. I'm not. I just want people to be safe, and I want people to be able to go and live their lives again. So just please think of other people just while you're trying to get through this. If you're still wearing a mask, please just protect yourself and protect others. That's all I'm going to say. The only way we're going to really get through this is if we try and help each other out. And for the most part, we're trying to really just move the needle forward. And there's a lot of us that have really just done a really great job of that. And I do tip my hat to them, especially getting us through this rough time and period. And that, my friends, is all the training camp notes that I have for the moment. So that's a pretty good setup. It's pretty interesting also that I'll mention real quick that we're definitely getting ready for the preseason games, and it's not going to take very long. It almost seems like the offseason wasn't even that far ago, and we had just finished seeing Tampa Bay win the Super Bowl. So along the lines, it's very exciting to get back into the rhythm of football and to just see everybody just come and have the chance and play competitively. So I really like from that standpoint that there's definitely been a lot of improvements, especially for the fact that we've been trying to keep fans safe and to get them back in the stadium. That's just the biggest thing. I know everybody's just felt out of place and it's just felt just miserable, especially the fact that we're just trying to get back to some sense of normality. But the good news is it definitely feels like we're getting there. There's just still a few bumps in the road, so along those lines we'll get there. But it's just everybody just trying to help everybody else and just trying to be considerate for all our friends and our neighbors. We don't want to see them in that position. And then there's a lot of us that have had family members and even friends that have been in that position, even maybe ourselves. So my just suggestion to everybody, please stay safe out there. Please just look after everyone and one another, and let's just try and get this thing over with. It's been a hindrance to everyone. And it's so nice to have that normalcy and just that feeling of just regularity again. So I'm very much looking forward, especially to having preseason start up, and the fact that we have the Hall of Football Enshrinees coming in, it just makes that even better, and it's just going to be a great opportunity for everybody just to enjoy this and just really just have that sense of just regularity again. So that's basically all it is, and let's just take care of one another, because at the end of the day, we're all we have. Well, guys, I want to take a quick 30-second break, and when I get back, I'm going to break down to you, is kicking progressing or degressing in the NFL? I've got some stats and some pretty good storyline that may show you what's going on with kicking. I'm Michael Bishop with the Power Hour. We'll be back in 30. The Power Hour is on the air, live streaming to you on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. I'm your host, Michael Bishop, and I'm glad that you're joining me on this Monday evening. We got a lot to talk about once again, and I'm glad we're getting back into this conversation. So let's get with it. From a report on Sharp Football Analyst, there's a discussion about field goal percentage declining in the NFL. And the strange truth is, it's actually been doing the opposite. What seemed like there's been a strain of just bad kicks and just missed opportunities is really more along the lines of coaches really playing the odds. And as weird as it sounds, the projections have really looked strongly, especially going forward in the late season. Now, we wonder why the kicking, especially in kicking field goals or extra points, have just looked like they've just been botched and haven't made any kind of improvement. Well, the real truth of that is a lot of coaches have been opting, especially between 31 and 49 yards in for field goals, to go for them instead of just punt the ball away, especially in that position. And through that, from that percentage, it has been a 64% increase instead of changing possession. So within 64% of that, you have a successful shot of actually adding points on instead of turning possession over to the opposite side of the team. And I'll break that down for you, especially going forward when projections looked pretty rough last year. In week 1 of 2020, the field goal percentage was down 70, was actually at a 71.6%. And it was the lowest game success rate in the NFL for 20 years. Now, what does that mean? That means in the last 20 years that there was many missed field goals and extra points. And from that percentage, it went from a steady number and it dropped all the way down to about 71.6%. So, retrospectively, the NFL has been very competitive, especially in trying to get longer field goals. Now, in the case of going for 50 yards or over, the percentage of that actually is an expected rate of 60%. Now, what the stats have said, and this is the surprising part, the actual rate of success for kicks 50 yards or over were 64%. And you're asking yourself, how's that possible? Well, let's put it this way. Most of the kickers in that range generally are guys that have been in the league for a while. And when you have an opportunity to get points, and especially try and not turn the ball over, most coaches have been opting to either go for long field goals or to go for it on fourth down if it's a short distance to try and make. And what you've seen is actually just an increase of what has actually transpired to be a more successful rate of going for a field goal with 50 yards or more. While the rate is 60% what it was projected, it was at 64. And you may think a 4% raise isn't that much of a difference. Well, it is, especially if your team vying for a higher position in playoff rankings, or if you're trying to win a game of interest to help you advance, especially if you're in a tight division race or you're trying to lock up a playoff matchup. That in case was what happened with the Tennessee Titans in week 17 against Houston. They needed to get that field goal, and it was a pretty long field goal. I believe it was about 49 yards. So it would be right on that edge point, and they iced the kicker, and then the second attempt doinked it off the upright, went back in, and it was good. So one of those situations where you just kind of have to double take and just shake your head for a second, like, wow, I can't believe what I saw. And naturally, the kicker that made that wasn't somebody that was consistently in the league. But it's still impressive, especially having that kind of trust in kickers to try and get you in that position to win the game. But you really have to understand, especially for the veteran kickers that have been in the league for a long time, they're going to have a lot more trust, and the coaches are going to go for that option, especially if they can go for a long field goal and get the points. It's better to come off the field with 3 points than hand the ball off and leave with nothing. At least you feel a little more fulfilled and you had a chance to make an opportunity of the play. And that's what a lot of coaches are trying to vie for, especially going forward. And I see that trend going even further next year. You're going to probably see a huge increase in guys trying to make field goals or kicks beyond 50 yards. And it's probably going to come down to that, especially if you're too close to the position to where you can't get the ball down to where you need it to, or you can't get the first down, or if you try and punt, you've got a guy that's pretty good at returning it, so you don't want to give him that kind of opportunity. So, in that sense, at this point, in an analytic standpoint, you really need to understand that points matter, especially no matter where you can try and get them on the field. It's imperative to the success of the team to try and make that opportunity be more viable and to be more persistent. You're going to be more of a complete team if you can go out there and get points on any situation, whether it be touchdown or field goals. And in this case, field goals are important. A lot of games, especially nowadays, come down between a field goal. So it's imperative, especially that success. Now, when it comes to like beginning of the season, I think it takes a lot of things. And one consideration, especially for the 2020 slow up, I think there was a lot of things to consider. Especially in Stephen Gostkowski's case, you had a guy coming back from a major injury. He really didn't have a chance to have a training camp, and eventually he just got a little better and started progressing as the season went on until he re-hurt himself. And especially with all the other kickers in the league, I think it's a situation you didn't have a training camp, you didn't really have an opportunity to get yourself more acclimated to the season and get your mind ready. So you saw the way a lot of the kickers just kind of overcame, and it's a mental game. I really feel it's always a mental game. When you get in that situation, you really can't get down on these guys because they're very sensitive, for one thing. And number two, you need them. You've locked them in for the whole year. So you can't just kind of brush them to the side and try and get somebody else in. You have chemistry there. And in the kicking game, chemistry is key. You have to have trust in your kicker, and especially in situations where you know you're going to need him down the line. So you can't be down on him. You can't browbeat him too much because the truth is, in these situations, the kicker has to be the guy that feels appreciated when it's needed. And he needs to be the guy that the team can kind of just build up, especially when he's down on himself. Because in games, you have to have a kicker that has to step in and make it to the opportunity where you can have a chance to win games or possibly get ahead in an overtime game. And it's always a mental game. So, from that standpoint, I really think you're going to see a new slew of younger kickers make it in the league. And we're already seeing a lot of the guys we grew up with are on the way out. And that happens. I mean, you rarely see guys make it in the league about 20 years as a kicker, and it's a rare thing. You'll see maybe a couple, and that's about it. But most kind of fall under the average. Maybe they can have about between a 5 or an 8 year run as a kicker. But a lot happens. A lot of wear comes on them, especially when they're having to take care of themselves long term and trying to keep their legs healthy, keep their back healthy. And especially you have to remember, some of these guys have taken some pretty vicious hits from guys that are weighing about 240, 250. And the kicker themselves is about maybe 170, maybe 180. So I really see a trend of younger kickers making it in the league. And I see another trend of coaches taking that opportunity and trying to get points, especially within they get 50 yards to try and make a field goal. So I don't think there's as much of a regression as there is just, I think it's just along the lines when the season starts, and due to the fact that there's probably not going to be a lot more preseason games, you're going to see a lot more guys struggle in the season. But I think they'll get their feet under them once they get more comfortable and they get a little more confidence. I mean, we all do a better job, especially when somebody's patting us on the back a little bit and encouraging us. If somebody's slapping you upside the head and kind of calling you out, I mean, you're not going to get a very good response from that. So, as an NFL coach and as NFL teammates, even, you got to encourage your guy. And you see that a lot, especially when it comes down to a kick where it mattered and maybe it even cost a game. So, the important thing is, I think that trend will continue. You're going to see guys struggle early in the season. You're going to see guys get a little down on themselves and just say, it's a fundamental thing. I've just got to get back to basics. And I think that's a big part of it, too, especially when you have the lack of training camp and you're not allowed to do as much as you were used to. And essentially, it's all but almost inevitable, like the NFL is trying to move the kicking game away from the game. But in retrospect, it's here to stay for now, and I don't see it going anywhere in the long term of things. So I think you just have to just recognize what it is. And from that standpoint, the NFL is going to continue. You're going to see those regressions and kicks. But when the season progresses on, it's going to continue to get better because these guys are going to get more confident. They'll have an opportunity to prove themselves, and coaches are going to take those chances and give them the opportunities to make those plays and help them advance. And that's what these guys need. They need that stability, they need confidence. And you continue that trend, and I think it'll be a win for everybody. But in those percentage things, and one of those funny stat lines is that 28% of the bad field goals missed, which was in line for a preview for the year total, which was expected of the percentage rates. So, along those lines, like I said, out of 154%, after 154 attempts, 60% of the attempts were rated for 60%. I'm sorry, I'm confused. I'm confused, everyone. From 154 attempts in 2020, 60% were expected to be made. And like I said before, 64% were actually made. And that was the viable number there. You're going to see that number get bigger, especially at the end of the season. And it did the same thing as 2020 progressed. And it's going to go along the lines of people are going to feel more comfortable with themselves. They're going to line up. They're going to get those plays done. That's the key point. And it's the trust that the coaches and the teammates put within the kicker. So in the long run, you're going to see a huge progression of kicking success later in the year, and especially in the playoffs. So it's definitely going to help move the needle forward. And it's definitely going to be one of the trends in the NFL that I think will continue, especially if the teams are willing to take that opportunity and just get points. And that's the whole name of the game in this game is to make points, whether it be touchdowns, whether it be safeties, whether it be drop kicks, whether it be field goals. That's what the NFL is about. It's about trying to win games, and you have to get points. And if you don't put the confidence in your kicker, especially when the season's young, and especially when things are starting to look bleak, it's not going to improve. So for any team out there right now trying to question if their kicking game will have success or they can't find that niche, I'm here just to encourage you. It's not going to be bad, especially if your team is out there trying to do the right thing and encourage the guy. It's always going to be a mental game. And mentally, we have to keep ourselves prepared. We have to stay sharp in a lot of instances. And the same goes for players in the NFL. They have to stay sharp. They have to do their assignments. They have to know the place. It's like the kicker has to go out there and have the confidence to know the field trajectory, to know where he wants to hit the ball, and to know where he's comfortable lining up to set the field goal. If you can build that and continue to ride that success, then eventually you will find the success that you need. And it's always good, especially when you can get those points on the board. And brings you the most needed wins. Well, all right, guys, let us take another 30-second break. And when I come back, I've got a list of the 2021 Hall of Fame enshrinements. And these are men of great character who have done so much for the game, and they deserve to have the spotlight shown on them. And I'm going to give that to them. I'm Michael Bishop of the Power Hour. We'll be back in 30. The Power Hour is on the air, live streaming to you on YouTube and Facebook. We're great. It's just a great day to have you here on Monday, going through some great topics today and getting ready to hit this next one. It is the list of our 2021 Hall of Fame inductees. And these are men that have done so much for the game, and they're men that we've grown up and admired even. A lot of us have watched them as time has gone on through the years. And even for some of us further back on decades, we get to look back and see the accomplishments of certain men, finally get the accolades that they deserve. And I'm very excited to go through this list with you. And these are just some men that have rightfully earned the right to have their bust put into Canton, Ohio. And I am very excited to just share their story and their stats with you. So let's hit the ground running and get to it. Our first one, of course, and no surprise, is the legend himself, Peyton Manning. Peyton, of course, coming from the University of Tennessee, taking them to newer heights, was drafted with the first round pick to the Indianapolis Colts. And of course, we all know the second being Ryan Leaf. With Peyton being drafted to the Colts, he spent roughly a nice period up till about 2011 there. And then going to the Colts after a trade, well, actually after a release, and then having the opportunity to be a free agent and decide where he wanted to go next. Peyton decided to finish his career with the Denver Broncos. And with that, cemented his legacy. Going to 2 Super Bowls as a Bronco and going to 2 Super Bowls as a Colt, winning one each. And along with that, an MVP. During Peyton's tenure in the league, he threw for 71,940 yards, 539 touchdowns, was a 14-time Pro Bowler, a one-time Comeback Player of the Year, 2 Offensive Players of the Year, 5 MVPs, and a Walter Payton Man of the Year award. And of course, we'll always remember Peyton for the famous Audible of Omaha. And it's really crazy the fact that Peyton Manning is being put into the Hall of Fame. It doesn't seem that long ago that we were watching him on TV. And the fact that he was able to put through an offensive system that was so complex and so mind-boggling at the time that he could just operate it just with ease. Peyton Manning was just one of those guys. He could make any player better on the field at the wide receiver position or the tight end position. He had that gift where he could get the ball to them and only to where they could get it. And one of the most impressive things about Peyton, he was always trying to find ways to get points. If he didn't get a touchdown, he just seemed more aggravated than anything, especially if they ended up with a field goal. It just seemed like he would take it personally. And through all the matchups, of course, some of the greatest matchups that Peyton Manning had was against Tom Brady. And even in that, Tom Brady and Peyton Manning's matchups were the stuff of legends. Fortunately, early in Peyton's career, Tom Brady seemed to be the more successful. But eventually, Peyton broke through in what would be their first trip to the Super Bowl and their first Super Bowl win. And through all the matchups between Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, and Tom Brady, Peyton Manning won 6 of those matchups, with Tom winning about 11. So their matchups were just amazing to watch. And of course, now Peyton Manning doing a lot of work, especially on TV, and being on Monday Night Football soon, I think that's going to help entice the game, especially with Peyton being a student of the game and really just showing the passion and the fortitude of just going out and sharing the game of football with the average fan. And a lot of people don't know average things or even a lot of just statistical points of football like Peyton does. And he truly appreciates the game, and he truly has done quite a lot for the game. As David Baker, the president of the Hall of Fame, would say, he has done a lot for the game and has continued to do a lot for the game. So, really, it's an amazing career that Peyton Manning has had, and it's just incredible the fact that we all got to witness it. And especially just from a fellow Tennessean, I enjoyed the time that he was here. I would have loved to seen him be Florida, I'll be honest, but it didn't happen. But his NFL career was nothing short but amazing. And especially if you were a fan of an opposite team that had to play Peyton Manning, it felt pretty damn good when you were able to beat him. So you definitely puffed your chest out a little bit when Peyton Manning came to town. So Peyton Manning definitely the head of this class, and there's no question about it. Coming in with Peyton, and most importantly, especially these two have had very close ties together from their days of the Heisman race, would be Charles Woodson. Charles, of course, spending his career with the Raiders and the most success of his career with the Packers. In that time, Charles had about 818 tackles, 148 assists, 18 fumbles recovered, 65 interceptions, one defensive player of the year, one defensive rookie of the year, and a Super Bowl win with 9 Pro Bowl visits. And Charles Woodson was literally the guy that could go out and just make quarterbacks just cringe at the way he could just cover guys. Charles Woodson could just go after players bigger than him. The tackles that he made were just inhuman at times. I definitely remember a few times where he went after Marshawn Lynch and was successful in it. Because I know Charles Woodson was not a very big guy, but the physical prowess that he had on the field and the way he could execute plays was just the stuff of like NFL films, where you would hear the music play and you would just see the player make these plays and it would just blow your mind at just what you were seeing. And Charles Woodson was just one of those guys that loved playing the game. And no, I know earlier on in his career, it seemed like he was just a little bit of a hothead and he kind of got himself in a little bit of trouble. But he really kind of straightened himself out going to Green Bay. I really felt like that's where he just shined the most. And in Dom Capers' defense, I really felt he found his true place where he could be successful and elevate his status from great to elite. And to that's really what sold the point of pushing Charles Woodson from that level and putting him into the Hall of Fame. Next up, one of my favorite players, and one of the sad stories that you just wish had a happier ending, was Calvin Johnson, aka Megatron. You really get to see guys come out in a position and dominate the way that Calvin Johnson did. Calvin Johnson came into the league from Georgia Tech, and not a lot of people knew him outside of Georgia Tech. But when he made the NFL, it was clear this guy had Jerry Rice special qualities all over him. And at times he seemed inhuman for some of the catches that he made and the way he would run routes and the way he could just play uncontested at times. It just seemed like there was hardly a corner or a defensive back or a safety that could cover him. The man could flat out catch anything. The man literally could catch footballs anywhere on the field, except for the case in Chicago, where I don't still understand how that wasn't a catch. But I won't go there. That's not fair. But throughout Megatron's career in Detroit, he spent 9 years there, made 731 catches, 11,619 yards, 84 touchdowns, and made 6 Pro Bowls. And once again, it was just seeing another player in their prime who had to like work as hard as they could to try and make their team successful. And the fact that he was with Detroit for so long, and they had a couple of good years, but they never fruitioned in anything that made teams fear Detroit in the long run. It's heartbreaking the fact that Johnson decided to retire, but it's understandable as well. When you get to a point in your life and you've really given all you can to the game, and he had, I don't blame him for walking away. I don't blame him for leaving. There just comes a point in your life where it's like, I can't do this anymore. And we've all come to that decision, especially with jobs or whether it's situations in our lives. We have to do what's best for us as individuals. And at that time, Calvin Johnson had done everything. He was the good teammate, he was the good friend. He wanted his team to be successful, but at the end of the day, they just couldn't do it. And when it came down to him making a choice to either just leave or retire, it came down to retirement. And granted, I know he did want to leave, but that's another story. And really, this is to celebrate what he's accomplished. And he accomplished a lot in the 9 years he was with Detroit. And that puts him right at the level, right with Barry Sanders. For a guy to go in the league and to be so dominant for even 10 years of your career. So Calvin Johnson, once again, another player deserving of that bust in Canton, Ohio. Our next guy going in, and one of my favorites, I love offensive linemen. I think anytime an offensive lineman gets into the Hall of Fame, it's a big deal because you have to be really special to try and crack through. And there's a lot of guys waiting. But I knew when I got to see him play, it was no doubt in my mind that Alan Faneca was going to get into the Hall of Fame. And throughout his career, he was a dominant force on the offensive line. The man could not be moved. He was always mentioned when the elites of the game were brought up. In the decades that he played, along with some of the other good players, and I'm not saying Alan Faneca played decades, but in the decade that he played, I would rephrase that he was so dominant. The man made 9 Pro Bowls and was able to win a Super Bowl. And some more fun facts: he actually had 10 tackles, 1 assist, and 11 fumbles recovered. So those are just some fun stats to know. But throughout his career, when he was with the Steelers, the Jets, or the Cardinals, the man literally played with a chip on his shoulder, and he played the way that some of the older linemen used to play. They played physical, they played hard, and they played to the end of the whistle. He was a guy that was controlled, and he was also a guy that really just was a team player. And this was a guy that just was really fun to watch. And it's hard to believe an offensive lineman being fun to watch. But it's not so far fetched, especially if you get to watch somebody dominate at the position that they play. And that's just how I always felt. I love guys that were able to get in there and get their hands dirty and get the job done. And Alan Faneca was one of those guys. And you just got excited when you saw him get a hold of somebody because you know he was going to get pancaked. Coming up next, on our list, and very deserving, would be John Lynch, who spent 15 years in the league with the Buccaneers and finished with the Broncos. He amassed 353 tackles, 142 assists, 13 sacks, 9 forced fumbles, and 26 interceptions. A 9-time Pro Bowler, and also one Super Bowl under his belt. John Lynch was always talked in conversations with the top safeties in the league. And at the time, John Lynch could hold his own with anybody. You literally see him go after some of the best wide receivers. One of my favorite matchups was in the Super Bowl with the Raiders. And I've never seen Tim Brown or Jerry Rice just have so much trouble trying to break free from a guy. And John Lynch was just a dude that just gave people fits. The guy just knew how to get under your skin. He was a notorious trash talker at times, but the guy just loved playing the game. And it was a no-brainer that he was going to end up in the Hall of Fame, especially for the time that he had, and just he was very beloved, especially in Tampa Bay, and for the time that he was in Denver. And right now, even as a GM, he's making success as the 49ers GM. So throughout, he's still involved in the game, and it's great to see him involved in the game because you want success for guys to just continue to go, especially even when they stop playing. And one of those guys that was a former player was Tom Flores. And surprisingly enough, he had played with the Raiders and even with his best year at that time, the Kansas City Chiefs. Where as a player, he won a Super Bowl and was an AFL Player of the Year in 1966, I believe. Then, when it came time to choose coaching, which he fell into the line of coaching, he had worked for a term with the Raiders as their wide receiving coach from 1972 to 1978, to where at the time he was given the head coaching job from 1979 up until 1989, I believe, and then finishing his career out with Seattle for a 2-year stint in 92 to 94. And through all that time, Flores was the first Spanish American head coach. And that was a great honor, especially for someone to break through the barrier at that time. And through the career that he had, he went to 2 Super Bowls, 15 and 18, and won them. His career overall win loss percentage came at 105 losses, or 105 wins, 90 losses, 97 in the regular season, 87 losses in the regular season, and an 8-3 record in the postseason. Definitely beloved by his players and was a huge part of a lot of success, especially with those Raider teams just getting started in LA and putting themselves out in the position to be successful. And one of the other players that I'm going to give a little love to that has finally broken through to get into the Hall of Fame and had been waiting so long that it was just crazy the fact this guy wasn't going to have an opportunity, and it would be Drew Pearson. Drew Pearson to me, and I had lived in Dallas for a time, and Drew Pearson was one of the beloved Cowboys. He was right up there in conversations with Roger Staubach and a lot of the other legends. Drew Pearson always got mentioned. And the fact in Drew Pearson's career, he spent 11 years with the Cowboys. He made 489 catches, 50 touchdowns, 7,822 yards, made 3 Pro Bowls, and won a Super Bowl. But through all that time, Pearson was just beloved, especially in the city of Dallas. And the older that he got, and especially when it was time for him to get the opportunity to go to Canton, it just didn't seem like it was going to happen. It just felt like he was going to be one of those guys that was sitting on the inside and watching everybody else getting that opportunity. And people would argue that his numbers weren't solid enough. But I felt at the time, for when he played, it was a very, very different league. And the fact that he amassed those numbers was very special. But as we know, the league became more pass oriented and passing records became more fluid. And you saw a lot more elevation as it went. So it just felt like Drew Pearson just didn't get that opportunity just to see himself get in when he had the opportunity to. But this is a guy that I really have felt great for. He's done so much for the game. He's been very involved in the community in Dallas, and he's very beloved. And he's spoken very highly of, especially with Roger Staubach and Jerry Jones. So the fact that he's gotten to do this and he will get to stand in Canton, Ohio, and he will get to put on his jacket, it's one of those things where you're very happy for them. And when you do get to watch their highlight reel, Pearson was just an amazing player, and he was an even amazing teammate. So I'm very grateful that he gets this opportunity. And there's a lot of other players that I'm hoping I get the chance to see get that, and hopefully in my lifetime. But Drew Pearson was definitely one of those guys on my list, and I'm very happy for him. And then finally, and I really think this was time for this individual to get into the Hall of Fame, especially for the contributions that they made, would be Bill Nunn. And most people don't know who Bill Nunn is outside of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, Bill Nunn had worked for the Pittsburgh Courier for a time. And in the 70s, he came to work for the Steelers. And at that time, Chuck Noll hired him. And he hired him to be the assistant personnel director from 1970 to 1987. And in that time, Bill Nunn went out to a majority of colleges and universities that were very African American oriented. They were very African oriented, where it was basically just black colleges or black universities. And he found an immense talent pool in a lot of these schools where they were overlooked. And some of the players that I'll name are in the Hall of Fame that Bill Nunn was responsible for scouting. And these players were Mel Blount, John Stallworth, Donnie Shell, and Greenwood. And last but not least, one of the other players that he did have a chance to scout was Jack Lambert. Then in 1987 through 2014, he was made into one of the Steelers scouts. And he held that position until he semi-retired. And unfortunately, he had passed away in May 6, 2014. And he was honored very much by the Steelers. The Rooney family was very heartbroken, especially that the loss of one of their family members that had worked so long for them. And especially opened a lot of doors for a lot of young individuals in predominantly black schools to actually get a chance to go and play in the NFL, where most scouts wouldn't pay attention to them. And many of the players that he did scout had nothing but praise for him. And it's sad that he doesn't get to see this, but I'm very grateful and I'm very happy, especially the people in his family and the people that he'd worked along with for so long get to share that and share the love of him on this day when he gets his bust presented in Canton. And really, for someone that just spent their whole life as a scout, but the way that they were just talked about and beloved and just shown that they were just more than a person that was about football, but a very compassionate person that Bill Nunn was. It just makes me grateful for the fact that he has his opportunity and that he got to share this with the friends and family that he had. And his life was celebrated even after he passed, that he'll get this opportunity to be immortalized and that his family will get that opportunity to share that with the friends and the teammates that he truly just enjoyed working with. Well, guys, let's take a quick 30-second break, and I will break down the upcoming preseason Hall of Fame game between the Cowboys and the Steelers. We'll take a quick 30-second break. This is the Power Hour. Back in 30. The Power Hour is on the air, live streaming to you on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. I'm your host, Michael Bishop, and thank you for joining me on this Monday evening. We've had a great time today. We talked about a lot of great topics, and we'll be ending the show with our first preseason game, and we'll be looking into this matchup between the Dallas Cowboys and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this will be on August 5th. I believe it's a Thursday night at 8 o'clock on Fox. And the two teams will be playing each other in the well-famed Canton, Ohio stadium. So looking forward to this matchup. There's a lot of just great matchups and key components going into this week, especially preparing for the regular season. Starting for the Cowboys, I think right now you're looking at the process of trying to ease Dak Prescott back in the lineup. I think he's going to play maybe about 2 or 3 series, but I know they're going to try and limit him as much as they can. It's important that they try and get him comfortable and adjusted back to the set of being the starting quarterback. But at this point, they know what they have, and they're not going to try and get him re injured, especially in a game where they're trying to figure out to fill slots and holes. So you'll see Dak Prescott for a little bit. You'll see Ezekiel Elliott. I think after a few series, they're probably going to be in street clothes after that. Then, of course, you'll have to discuss their star receiver, CeeDee Lamb, which I feel is going to be a very key component, especially moving their offense forward. He had a very successful college career, and from that standpoint, I really feel he's once again one of those guys Jerry Jones sees just a lot of big things happening for. He's very competitive. He's very intelligent from a football perspective of getting off the wide receiver position and breaking away from the defensive backs. So I really want to see what he's going to bring to the table, especially trying to get things fixed on the wide receiver end and trying to help Amari Cooper. Then on the defensive side, after a huge fail at the defensive coordinator position, Dallas went out and brought in Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn, of course, having his most success with the Seattle Seahawks, and I think he could replicate that, especially with the little core that he has now in Dallas. If Jerry Jones is willing to spend a little bit of money and add on to that, I think adding Hooker on, especially at the safety position, really will help them. And Dan Quinn's a very good master at manipulating schemes. So I really feel that he's a good fit, but can he and Mike McCarthy coexist without bumping too much heads? If McCarthy lets Quinn do his job, then I really think the Cowboys have a chance at probably making a little noise this season, despite there being some fairly decent competition, especially in the NFC East. Now we'll look on the Steelers side of things. And of course, the biggest story right now is Big Ben. Coming in at age 39, he's done a lot throughout his NFL career. But the biggest thing right now is, does he have enough in the tank to go for one more big run? Where they started out the season 12-0 and then just puttered out to nothingness. It just seems like there's a lot of holes for this team to try and continue to build on. And one of the biggest problems that this team had, especially going into the offseason, was stripping down the offensive line and adding newer pieces in. So my question is, especially with Mike Munchak, who's a master at building offensive linemen and getting them prepared for the season, is this going to be enough to help push them over the limit? You also have to look at one more key piece that I think will be a big help, and that's the addition of Najee Harris from Alabama. And a lot of people have been praising him, especially from his running style, that he's aggressive, he's a nose to the grindstone kind of guy, and he's like a poor man's Derrick Henry in some cases. So I'm really excited to see what he'll do. I think the Steelers want to get him started early and add him to about all their play calls run wise that they can. So I feel that that's going to be a very good matchup, especially with the defense. I really want to see him get out there and just start hitting people, just like the Steelers of the old used to do with the running game. So you're kind of hoping that just kind of brings back the Jerome Bettis bust kind of days, or even Willie Parker. So I think it'll be a good game. I think you'll have a potential good matchup. Unfortunately, the starters, you're not going to see a lot of them. They're basically probably going to play 2 or 3 series. Then that'll be it. Then you're going to see the backup guys. And those are going to be the key pieces, especially trying to fill a roster. So, really, in the long term, I think I'll have to go with Dallas winning this game. I think it'll be about a 20-13 win. But I just think Dallas has a better backup situation than the Steelers do right now. Even with Dwayne Haskins coming in as a backup quarterback, I still feel Dallas will probably be better at the running game, and that's what they'll ride out to win the game. Well, guys, thank you for joining me so much tonight on the Power Hour. And I do have a little bit of news. And it's not official yet, but I may have a special guest coming on the show for next Monday. And it might be the all amazing and the elusive Mr. Titan. That's right, it may be. We'll just keep finding out as the week goes on, but we may have Mr. Titan on Monday. So just keep your fingers crossed. We'll definitely be looking forward to that. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining me on the Power Hour. Don't forget, if you love the show, help it grow. Please like and subscribe today and watch some of the older shows. You'll definitely enjoy them if you've enjoyed this. I'm your host, Michael Bishop. Have a good night and an even better tomorrow. Take care.